Good morning. Today on Spotlight, an insightful conversation with the man who is the driving force behind one of Michigan's most respected and nonpartisan think tanks and leadership training organizations. My guest, Dr. Matt Grossmann, director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research and professor of political science at Michigan State University in East Lansing. It's Sunday, December the 22nd. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Dr. Matt Grossmann of Michigan State University, thank you so much for joining us. You're doing well?
I am, thank you.
Very good. You all ready for these holidays?
We are. We had the staff parties ready for the travel. Got some presents under the tree.
Sounds like you've got it in good order. Let me ask you, Dr. Grossmann, we're coming to the end of 2024, which of course was a huge political year. Let's start statewide here in Michigan. Are we a red state, a blue state, or are we a purple state based upon what you now see?
Well, very purple. We're right at the national average, and we have swung like swing states should with the national electorate the last three elections. And this one, we got even closer to the national popular vote. So we're right there in the middle.
Right after election, you had a forum there through your Public Policy and Social Research Institute with political pundits and others. What was the takeaway?
The folks that run campaigns know that they're in a nationalized political environment. They're not going to get many people who voted for Trump to vote for Democratic candidates or voted for Harris to vote for Republican candidates, but they're still trying very hard to get those few remaining voters who will cross over. And that was the interesting part here is we had several districts where people were able to win, even if their presidential candidate didn't, just because there's still just enough votes there on the margin, as we saw in the Senate versus the presidential race, to make a difference.
Sure. We have now watched what was very blue there in Lansing in terms of the leadership in the legislature now do a little flip, and the House is going to be controlled by the Republicans. What do you see coming down the pipeline? Is this going to make for a ton of gridlock, or might this be good for the people of Michigan?
It did go from blue to mixed, but it was only a small majority, and it will only be a small majority in the next legislature. So a lot is going to still need bipartisan support. That's the norm. There does seem to be plenty on the governor's agenda that is also on the Republican House agenda, like road funding, like reforms to minimum wage, and sick leave. So I think they'll have some opportunities to get things done in the new year as well.
As we speak, and things will probably have changed by the time this hits the air on Sunday, we are going through lame duck in the legislature, and we had a walkout there with Republicans. What do you make of that? And is it kind of a pox on both the Democrats and the Republicans on this? Or is this normal political jockeying and lame duck?
It is always hard to pass bills with only one party supporting them, trying to get everybody in that party supporting, and then railroading the opposition. That's what all the partisans want, but it's never the norm, and it's difficult to get it done, especially with small majorities. You have to have every single person on board. And it appears that what happened this time is that a lot of people were made promises that said, oh, well, we'll do it in lame duck, but hadn't actually lined up all of the votes for their side to support that. So the Republicans walked out. They don't want these bills moving forward, and the Democrats don't have enough bills that they have everyone's support behind.
You wrote a book not terribly long ago that you got a lot of publicity for called Red State, Blue States, how the conservatives kind of lost their way. But are you working on a new book? Because when you look at least what's happening nationally, it appears as though the Republicans have found their way again.
Yeah, the book also said that Republicans were succeeding electorally and had taken over a lot of state governments, but hadn't necessarily reduced the size and scope of government or reversed liberal trends in policymaking. That's still true. Republicans are winning some elections, but not necessarily changing the size and scope of state government. And it's going to be hard for the new Republican majority to do that as well.
What are you reading? What are you hearing? What do you think is happening in the mood of Michigan and America as it relates to the electorate and the population and their view on politics today, which has, of course, become very, very partisan?
Well, on the one hand, there isn't a lot of change for most people. That is, most people are voting for the same candidates they did last time. The correlation in vote for at the county level is 0.99 from one election to another, the most we've ever had. On the other hand, we had a nationwide shift from the Democrats to the Republicans that occurred in most demographic groups and in most geographic areas, and that mirrored international trends where voters are upset with incumbent parties over the post-COVID inflationary economy, and that was true here as well. We're also seeing some long-term trends that continued in this election, including the increase in educational polarization, where college-educated voters continue to be Democrats' strong suit and non-college voters their weakness, and some racial depolarization, where Republicans have gained among non-white groups across the board. So it'll be interesting to see how those trends continue.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break. We'll come right back. I want to get your view on what impact, if any, redistricting has had in the state of Michigan. We'll be right back with Dr. Grossmann right after this. And welcome back to Spotlight, talking to Dr. Matt Grossmann, professor at Michigan State University and director of the Policy Research Center there. If you had to put a grade on the Whitmer administration during her 2 terms in office, what would you give her and why?
I guess a B in terms of making policy change. She was able to reverse a lot that the Republicans had accomplished under Snyder. She was able to get some of her priorities through. In terms of the impact of those priorities, they've been a little lackluster in terms of immediate impact. Some of the big economic development packages haven't worked out as advertised, and some of the other policy initiatives haven't been able to move forward. So she's won some and lost some, and that's the norm.
Sure. She is now officially in political terms, viewed as a lame duck governor, even though she has some time left to be able to try to get her policies through. Certainly she cannot run again because of term limitation, and so others are starting to jockey and get their wishes in to become the next governor. But what do you think she would like to get done during the time she has remaining, and what do you believe the people of Michigan would like to see get done? And those two don't always necessarily go hand in hand.
Well, she, of course, ran on fixing the roads, and she still wants a package of transportation funding. It's just that that money has to come from somewhere, and no one's in agreement about where that money is coming from. She also is facing negative wins, reverse wins in terms of the federal government's support for states. We have been really able to balance the budget quite easily in the last few years because we have a lot of money coming in from the federal government. That money has run dry after the COVID relief packages have run dry. And so it'll be a lot harder to come up with that money for roads than it would have been a few years ago.
And do you see roads as the common ground that they may strike between her administration and the Republican leadership, with Speaker Matt Hall already putting a proposal on the table?
I do. I see that as potential common ground, but a long fight to figure out who the money comes from. I think earlier in the new administration, they'll get some kind of a deal on the minimum wage and the paid sick leave. That's been a priority of chambers of commerce and doesn't seem likely to pass in the lame duck. But the governor appears to be on board with that.
You told me before we started you're working on a new book. Can you talk about it much?
Sure. It is very related to this conversation. It's called Policy Making for Realists, and it's saying we're stuck with a two-party system that is going to be quite close, divided between the two parties. And so, how does policymaking move forward in that environment? And the big lesson is that everybody wants things to be different. They want their party to win a big majority and then be able to pass things on their own without taking into consideration the views of the minority party. But that's really not ever how it has worked in the norm. Most presidents and governors have gotten, one or two major priorities through without the support of the other party, but they've had to rely on bipartisan policymaking. And we're in an environment where that's likely the dose of reality for the foreseeable future.
Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan recently announced that he's going to run for governor of Michigan, but he's going to run as an independent. Does that feed right into your book and what you're talking about now, the frustration with both Democrats and Republicans? And do you think he has a legitimate shot at becoming governor running as an independent in this state?
Well, there is a lot of frustration, but the frustrated people don't necessarily all agree. Some of them are between the two parties. Some of them are more extreme than the one or both of the two parties. And the people who disagree with one party on one thing don't always disagree on the same thing. So that means that when you announce that you're an independent, that might be kind of your height of potential success. But once people start drilling down on the details, they tend to find things that they agree with one party more than the other. So that's the uphill battle that he faces. But he has the money and the media coverage, which are two things that non-major party candidates typically lack. So there's certainly a chance, but by no means can you just look up the number of independent voters and say, there we go, that's Mike Duggan's coalition.
And I think what you're also saying is that at some point on the campaign trail, you have to come up with what your platform is and what you stand for, and that's sometimes where the devil is in the detail.
That's right. We have a divided party system, not just because we're in two groups and we have different team sides, but because people disagree with one another and they've figured out which party agrees with them more on most issues. So even the people who perceive themselves as independent, for the most part, know which party they agree with more, and that makes it hard to support the other party. It doesn't mean that you can never support an independent candidate, but that independent candidate would have to find the right combination of issue positions. That's hard to do in a polarized world.
Okay, I teased to the audience that we talk about redistricting. When you get off this Zoom, you told me you're going to be going and talking to people about redistricting. What impact has it had based upon what you've seen in this last election, and what do you see coming down the line? And is Michigan better off for the redistricting that it did now?
Well, the Independent Redistricting Commission did achieve one of its primary goals, which was to make sure that the statewide distribution of votes matched the seats that the parties gained in the state legislature and in the U.S. Congress. And that happened. Now, for the second election in a row, we had a party win by a small number of votes statewide, 1 or 2%, and then also gain a small advantage in the House chamber and in the statewide congressional delegation. And it matched the statewide winning party in both cases. The Democrats won the election in 2022 statewide, and they won the majority. Republicans won the election statewide in 2024, and they won the majority. So on that ground, it is working as advertised. Racial representation, as you know, the commission had to redraw the districts in response to a court order for the House and the Senate. This was the first time the House competed on those redrawn districts, and really not a lot changed. We had 12 incumbents win. We had one change from a retiree. Really not a lot of sign that those redrawn districts made a difference in the legislature.
All right, we need to take a quick little pause for the cause. We'll come right back and we'll talk about leadership training. Stay with us. Dr. Grossmann, let's take it to the national level for a little bit before we talk about some of the grassroots leadership training that you do there at Michigan State University. What do you make of the Trump administration coming in and what happened here in Michigan? He took all of these swing states, whether it's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all at one time people thought would be the blue wall, turned out not to be the blue wall. And what do you think we're going to see on a national level? What's going to be the real test for the Trump administration in terms of leadership over the next 4 years?
Well, first on electoral side, Michigan remains at the top of the pile. We were the second most visited state, the second highest spending, and we came in second in terms of the most likely tipping point states, all to Pennsylvania. So we will remain at the top of the national agenda. In terms of the new administration, Trump is appointing quite a few people who will be at odds with the agencies that they are directing. That historically has posed problems for trying to get bureaucracy below you to do what you want from the leadership position of someone moving in an opposite direction. And then on the legislative side, we're already seeing, even before the Trump presidency, that corralling the small majority of House Republicans together in support of the president's initiatives is going to be difficult because there are people who want different things. Some people say they want a lot less spending, but a lot of people want more defense spending or more agricultural spending. So putting all that together is going to be a difficult task.
Do you anticipate Governor Whitmer and President Trump locking horns anywhere during these next 4 years the way they did during the pandemic? Or have times changed enough with Governor Whitmer now trying to put a cap on what her legacy will be and President Trump now trying to chart the next 4 years and work on his legacy?
I'm sure there will be opportunities for fights, but Governor Whitmer has been among the most conciliatory of the Democratic governors to President Trump so far. So she has.
And why do you think that is?
She's tried to voice a change because she has a lot at stake in the Trump administration. The Biden administration sent a lot of money to Michigan, including for electric vehicles and factory changes that the new president could take back. And so she needs to stay in good graces and to try to work on behalf of Michigan. And that's what she's signaled that she's willing to do.
A lion's share of these battery plants are actually in red states. So even though President Trump sort of campaigned against that, do you think that, you know, how politics is, it all becomes local, as Tip O'Neill once said, that when reality hits and legislators, Republican legislators, start looking at what's bringing in jobs and money in their area, that there's going to be a lot of pushback on that?
That's certainly the Democrats' theory, that these policies will be sustainable because they are going disproportionately to Republican states and districts. But the plans on the books are to reverse a lot of that spending from the Inflation Reduction Act. So if they have to try to balance the books at all with these large tax cuts that they're proposing, it's going to be tempting to reverse some of the spending that just came from the Biden administration, including those electrical vehicle transition dollars.
Do you see signs that the Michigan Republican Party is in good shape now? Pete Hoekstra seemed to have whipped it back into line because it was pretty chaotic before he took over as its chair, but now he's on his way to Canada as ambassador. What's the forecast of what's going to happen? Are we headed back to chaos, or will there be continual leadership in the tradition that Pete Hoekstra did?
Well, at least we don't have two competing Republican parties anymore, so we're on the upswing. But I would say the election mainly proved that this didn't matter as much as people thought. The House Republicans were running pretty independent campaigns with their own source of funding, independent of the state party. And the presidential campaign was able to operate well in the state. Without really a whole lot of help from the state Republican Party. So there was a lot of drama. It's at least subsided for the moment, but it may not have mattered as much as we thought.
One of the hallmarks of your institute is leadership training. Has that changed in any way, shape, or form from when it was originally started to what it is today based upon what's happening in terms of the political mood of Michigan and America today?
We certainly see the polarization firsthand because we train people who want to run for elected office or are already in elected office or are working for elected officials. And in all of those spaces, we see Democrats and Republicans coming in knowing that they disagree with one another on quite a few things. But that doesn't mean they're unwilling to work together. We've actually still found that people have a lot of openness to learn. They want to hear the best argument from the other side, especially in closed settings like these. In order to understand the other side. So yes, the polarization is real and we see it every day, but that doesn't mean that people aren't interested in finding common ground where they can.
And Professor Grossmann, final question. You teach political science. What are you seeing in your political science students today and students there at the university? Are they apathetic in terms of politics? Are they excited? Are you excited from what you hear from them about what the future may bring?
Well, two trends are clear. One is that there's just a small section of the student base and the population as a whole that's hyper interested in politics and can follow every single detail of things going on at the national level and at the state. But they are the outliers. Most people are paying very little attention to politics until it comes close to election day. And even then, they don't tend to learn a whole lot about the candidates, especially at the state level. So that sort of division between the hyper-focused and most people is very apparent among the students. And then the other big change is the concentration in social and cultural issues. Economic issues have really lost resonance with the younger population relative to these social and cultural issues like abortion, like guns, like immigration, that really are the topics of chief concern among the youngest population.
Dr. Grossmann, Director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research there at Michigan State University. Thank you so much for joining us today. Happy holidays and safe travels to you.
Thank you, to you as well.
Thank you so much. And we'll be back to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's it for this Sunday. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Kwanzaa.